Hello everybody, welcome to the latest installment of Anatomy and Physiology. Today is circulation day 2, and we are going to be working on reviewing parts of the heart and how circulation happens, and we will also be talking a little bit about valves, and we'll be talking a little bit about blood vessels. Your assignments today are to watch this video, watch a review video about blood vessels on Crash Course. It is an ed puzzle, and make sure that you're using a name that I know you by. So please no mysterious aliases, because I can't give you points if I don't know who's turned in the video. Then there's an exit ticket where I'm going to ask you to upload IP number 1, and then work on IP number 2. There's a reading posted on Haiku. As always, email me if you have any questions. Come to my office hours, 1 to 2 p.m. every day. I'm on the Google. Yeah, let's get started. So, circulation day 2. Take a moment and try to label parts of this heart. So maybe pause the video and try to label as many of these as you can. For a heads up, the blue are blood vessels. The green are chambers. The orange are valves. And the black is a wall. You've only seen 2 valves so far. They should have been in your IP from last night. Just label those 2 from now and then glance at the rest of the diagrams, but you only need to fill out the first one. Oh, you don't have access to the rest of the diagrams. Sorry, it's a packet that usually is printed out. So right now, just try to fill this out, pause the video, and we'll go over it right now. So, first things first, we're going to start with blood vessels. There we go. Starting with the biggest blood vessel, biggest artery in your body, this is your aorta. Notice that it has this major arch, and then there's a bunch of different arteries that branch off of it that go to your body. Next up, we got veins. So we have the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava, which are both very large veins in your body. So they are returning blood to your heart. Next, you have your pulmonary artery. Remember, arteries move away. So your pulmonary artery is taking blood from your heart to your lungs. And then you have your pulmonary vein, which is returning blood from your lungs to your heart. Okay, valves. So, oh no, not valves, chambers, sorry. The top chambers are called the atria, and the bottom are ventricles. So this one here is your right atrium, because it's like stage directions here, right? So even though it's on the left side of this diagram, it's your right atrium, and then your right ventricle. And then you have your left atrium and your left ventricle. And with this, if you're confused as to like what is what, the right ventricle will pump into the pulmonary artery. So if you see a ventricle that is connected to a pulmonary artery, that is the right ventricle. The left ventricle pumps into the aorta. So you can't see it here because it's behind the pulmonary artery, but this pumps into the aorta, so that is the left ventricle. Okay, valves. So you might not know a ton about valves yet. We're going to talk more about them today. But our first 2 valves that we're going to talk about are atrioventricular valves. So those, you can tell by the name, are between your atria and your ventricles. So this one between your right atrium and right ventricle is called your tricuspid valve, because there's 3 flaps. And then the one on the other side between your left atria, left ventricle, is your bicuspid valve. It's also called your mitral valve. So you might see it as bicuspid, you might see it as mitral. So those are your atrioventricular valves. The other valve that is on here is your pulmonary valve. That is your semilunar pulmonary valve. So this goes into your pulmonary vein. The other one would be your aortic valve, and it would go into your aorta. The line that separates the ventricles is called the septum. Okay, so that's a lot on this screen, but this is all labeled nicely. So these PDFs are up on the Haiku page. You can check it out there. Okay, so heart tissue layers. The heart has 3 layers, like many of the other parts that we've talked about. So starting out with your outer layer, you have the epicardium. Epicardium is on the outside. It actually sits just beneath the pericardium. So your pericardium is the membrane that surrounds your heart. And then your pericardium would be here. There's a cavity. And then your epicardium is here. Your myocardium is this middle layer. This is like your actual muscle tissue here. So your myocardium is what contracts and causes your heart to beat. And then the endocardium is this inner layer, that is attached via connective tissue, and it lines the inner parts of the chambers of your heart. So remember, with the flow of blood, we learned about a figure 8 circulation flow. So starting at the heart, you'll go right atrium, right ventricle, pulmonary veins to your lungs, pulmonary arteries back to your heart. And then that blood has become oxygenated, so it goes out to tissues. So you go through your aorta, to your arteries, to the tissues in your body, back through your veins, through the vena cava, back into your heart, and it's then deoxygenated, so it needs to go back into the pulmonary veins. So this part of your circulation to your pulmonary veins, to your lungs, that's called your pulmonary circuit. And then this part out to your body tissues, to your body systems, is called your systemic circuit. So blood flow in the heart, we kind of alluded to this, but this is a pretty good picture with arrows. So if I have blood coming back from, let's say, from my head, it would come in via the superior vena cava, because that's coming from the top of your body, into your right atrium. It would then travel through your tricuspid valve into your right ventricle, and then go through your pulmonary valve into your pulmonary artery, and then it goes to your lungs, and it trades its carbon dioxide for oxygen, and it becomes oxygenated, and then it comes back to your heart via pulmonary veins into your left atrium, through your bicuspid valve into your left ventricle, and then through your aortic valve into your aorta, and then back out to the different tissues of your body. Okay, so that is how the blood flows through the heart. And feel free to watch that over if you need it again. Okay, so blood vessels. If we're talking about arteries and veins, right? Veins go toward the heart. So your pulmonary veins go from your lungs to your heart. Your superior vena cava goes from the upper part of your body to your heart. And inferior vena cava goes from the bottom part of your body into your heart. These are very, very large blood vessels. And then your arteries go away from your heart. So your pulmonary arteries go away from your heart to your lungs. And then your aorta goes away from your heart to other arteries throughout your body. One more thing about veins. So arteries and veins. Arteries, your heart beats and that blood pushes through your arteries. So your arteries have typically a higher pressure in them, and there's more force of that blood moving through them. Your veins have less pressure because that blood has traveled all the way down to whatever tissues it's going to, has traveled through your capillaries, and has lost a lot of its momentum. And because of that, your some of your veins have valves in them that will close to prevent backflow and prevent your blood from pooling, especially in the lower part of your body. Okay, valves. So we talked about these a little bit. You read about atrioventricular valves today. Your atrioventricular valves, notice you have the word atrium and ventricle in here. They allow blood to move from your atriums from your atria to your ventricles. You have your tricuspid valve, which is here, tricuspid valve. It has 3 flaps, and it is between your right atrium, right ventricle. And then you have your bicuspid valve here, also known as your mitral valve. So 2 flaps, bicuspid, and it moves from left atrium to left ventricle. Your semilunar valves allow for blood to be pumped out of the heart. So you have your pulmonary valve here between your right ventricle and your pulmonary artery. And then you have your aortic valve here between your left ventricle and your aorta. Cardiac cycle, so you have 2 phases in your cardiac cycle, each of which you can be heard. Oh, there's a typo, can be heard if you listen closely. So systole is the lub. It is the period of contraction when your heart the heart undergoes while it pumps blood. And then diastole is the dub, and it's the period of relaxation that occurs when your chambers fill with blood. Important to note that your atria have systole and your ventricles have diastole, and your atria have systole and your ventricles have systole. Okay, so atria systole would be when those atria are pumping, and then atria dystole is when it relaxes and fills back up. Same thing with your ventricles. Your ventricle systole is when your ventricles contract and squeeze, and then your ventricular dystole is when they relax. So in your blood pressure, your systolic blood pressure is the top number, so the 120 and 120/80. And then the diastole is the bottom number, so the 80 and the 120/80. So when that bottom number gets high, like when the top number is high, it's also concerning. But when the bottom number is high, that means that your heart is still working hard even when it's at rest. Okay, so rest of class today, work on cardiovascular IP number 2, use a reading that is up on the haiku. Go through the Ed Puzzle review of blood vessels and use your own name. And then do an exit ticket and upload IP number 1. I hope that you are all doing well. I hope that you are healthy. And I will see you next week. Bye.